what is globalization? So I already told it is the catchy word of the 21st century. During the 90s, it is used mostly by the scholars. So the globalization means nothing. It is the process of interaction and integration among the people. It is the process of interaction and integration among the people, companies, governments, and worldwide. So in the other words, globalization is a process of growing interdependence between people of all the nations. Further, it means the globalization is the connection of different parts of the world, resulting in the expansion of international, cultural, and political activities. So it is the movement and integration of goods and people over the different countries. Okay, so this is about the globalization. Next, we need to understand more. There is a need to discuss, to see the definitions of globalization. So the globalization is so controversial. It is so controversial because the definitions available in many fields. So that is why I told it is so controversial. So the globalization, in the terms of economics, globalization means extending of economic activities across national boundary. It means integrating the economy of the country to the world economy. As a result of globalization, international markets regarding goods, services, technologies, finance, and labor are integrated. So, in the short terms, globalization is the free flow of economic transactions across the political boundaries of the nation. In the terms of political science, it is nothing. It is a borderless state. It is borderless state. The state across the boundary is defined in the field of politics and yeah. So in the broader sense, globalization is the expansion and intensification of connections and movements of people, goods, capital, ideas, and cultures between the country. So the most broadly, the globalization is the expansion and intensification of linkages and flow across the boundary. So according to International Monetary Fund, so globalization is characterized by increases in flow of trade, capital, and information, as well as mobility of individual across the boundary. So this is the definition given by International Monetary Fund. So the definitions available in all the fields, in the politics, in the society, sociology, and the economics. So the globalization defined in a different manner in different subjects. But according to IMF, that is International Monetary Fund, globalization is characterized by increases in flow of trade, capital, and information, as well as mobility of individual across the boundary. Now, you clear about uh, globalization, I think. So now from the definition of globalization, we can identify the futures of the globalization. So we can identify some future from the basic ideas, from the basic definitions or meaning, from the basic ideas, from the meaning, we can identify the futures of globalization. That is globalization integrate the domestic economy with the global economy. The globalization integrate the domestic economy with global economy, and the globalization opening up the economy to foreign capital, foreign investment, foreign technology, and free competition. So this is also identified from the words of globalization. So the third thing is globalization promotes free international trade with a liberalized approach towards exports and imports. It means nothing. It means removing of all tariffs and non-tariff restriction in the exchange. So state adjust their policies for the free flow of trade. Okay, so that is why it promote the free international trade. So the next thing is globalization encourages expansion of multinational corporation because the states are opened for their policies for the attraction of multinational corporations. So that is why globalization encourage expansion of multinational corporations, that is MNCs. So the globalization also in favor of free flow of international capital and other economic transaction across the political boundaries of the nation. So the next future is the development of science and technology. It's also the integral process of globalization because this the advancement of science and technology only accelerated the movement of globalization. This only accelerated, geared the process of globalization. It means it is a vehicle through that only globalization travel. Okay, so that is why it accelerated the movement of globalization, which is the development of science and technology. And the another thing is cultural, political, social, and environmental dimensions are also seems to be increasing in the process of globalization. So not only in the economic uh, development, economic process, but also cultural, political, social, and environmental dimensions are also seems to be increasing the process of globalization. So the next feature is globalization increased the role of international corporations. This is because in the process of globalization, international institutions like IMF, WTO, like this international organization playing an important role in determining the policies of countries because these IMF, WTO are guiding the sovereign states to adjust the policies in favor of globalization. So that is why I told these institutions are playing the major role in the process of globalization. Thus, the globalization Thus, the globalization is characterized by shrinking space, shrinking time, and disappearing the borders because it moves, it changes the world in the small one. So that is why it has shrunk, open the door to opportunities. So it shrink the space, shrink the time, and disappearing the border. So these are the futures of the globalization. So there is a need. The next we will see some of the factors responsible for globalization. Factors responsible mean which are the factor promoting the globalization, which are the factor accelerated or geared the globalization. So what are the factors behind the development of the process of globalization? That thing we are going to discuss under the factors responsible for the globalization. Factors responsible for globalization. So under this head, we are going to discuss these 7 things. So these 7 things we are going to discuss under this head. So that is first, and the first one is policies of liberalization. Policies of liberalization. The pursuance of policies of liberalization by different countries in the post-communist era mainly account for the growth of globalization. So after the collapse of Soviet Union, I already told many states changing their ideology towards liberalized one. As a result of that, as a result of this, policies restriction on international economic transactions were removed. With the removal of these constraints, with the removal of these uh, policies, this road to the globalization was all clear. So this moved the countries towards the globalization. So the removal of the constraints in the country due to the policies of liberalized policies, the constraints are removed. So that is why everything is clear so far the development of the globalization. Okay, so with the first, the impact of openness was witnessed in the world trade in goods and services. It was followed by the foreign direct investment and the financial sectors. In this way, the globalization occupies the entire space. Okay, so the next factor is the technological revolution. The technological revolution. So I already told it is the major force for the promotion of globalization. It is the major force because it only accelerated the process of globalization. So the revolution, in the spheres of transport and communication has converted the world into a global village. So the computers, satellite, internet, e-commerce, email, and information technology all have served to remove frontiers of time and space. Besides, the cost of transmission and reception of information has fallen considerably. For example, you take with the help of Amazon, you will purchase chocolates from Switzerland. You know, Switzerland is one of the most famous countries for chocolate. It will be delivered to our home within a days. So it is possible because of the advancement of science and technology. Whatever you want from the world, you can purchase through the mobile phone. So that is why the globalization, the technological revolution open uh, or provide the space for the development of globalization. Okay. Okay, so the next factor is new forms of industrial organization. New forms of industrial organization. New forms of industrial organization. So the development of management techniques in industrial organization has also accelerated the process of globalization. So, you know, due to the technological advancement, said before, falling the share of wages in cost of production, increasing importance of mutual closeness between the producers and the consumers, etc., also accelerated the process of globalization. You may ask, how it reduced the wages, how it reduced the wages. For example, you take multinational organization established their industrial branches, mm, places close to where they purchase the raw materials or the close to where the cheap labor market is available. So they established their branches where is the resources available in economic. So that is why they reduce the cost of production. Okay, for example, you take why the many car companies started in India, particularly in Chennai, because of availability of cheaper human resources. Okay, do you clear? Okay, so the 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 next thing is the next factor is failure of Soviet socialist model. We already discussed about this in the late 80s and 90s. Centrally planned and command economics of the Soviet Union and East European countries failed because after the collapse of communalism, after the disintegration of Soviet, so the Soviet model is failed. By 1991, communist system collapsed in these countries due to dismal economic performance, controlled markets, and closed door policy. After the failure of Soviet socialist model, all these countries also adopted Western model of free market economy, policies of liberalization and globalization because they already experienced. So Soviet socialist model is the closed model, so it is also failed. So that is why the developing countries moved towards the liberalized model, which is used in the Western democracies. Okay, so that is why the failure of Soviet socialist model also one of the responsible for the development of the globalization. So the next one is the next factor responsible for the development of globalization is example of some developing countries. Example of some developing countries. Experience of some Asian developing countries also promoted the idea of globalization. The countries like South Korea, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong are adopted the policies of liberalization and globalization. They achieved new heights of economic success. These success stories of globalization inspired the other developing countries to move towards the globalization. So that is why these things, these the examples of some of countries, some of the countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan are also stimulate the countries to move towards the globalization. So the another very important factor is the role of sole superpower, that is USA. So after the disintegration of Soviet Union, collapse of communism, and the achievement of capitalism elevated the status of America as a sole superpower. So the political hegemon, the role of political hegemon, role of the political supremacy of US has also been instrumental in speeding up the process of globalization. Existence of superpower is one of the essential character for the development of globalization. The currency of such superpower that facilitates smooth running of international markets. You know how much dollar played in the international market. Okay, you know. So that is why there is a need, because dollar is the currency of superpower. How much the dollar play the role in the international market. So there is a need of superpower countries or country. So the currency of such superpower that facilitates the smooth running of international market. By playing this role, the US facilitate the process of globalization. So the final factor of responsible for the globalization is the role of international institutions. The role of international institution. So several international institutions, namely, you know, that is World Trade Organization, WTO, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, as well as UN agencies such as ILO, UNDP, or UNCTAD, etc., have also created an international environment in which the process of globalization may flourish. How this role of international organization geared or accelerated the process of globalization? Because, for example, you take WTO. WTO, what it did? So WTO framed the policies and advised the member countries to rectify that policies. So the WTO created the policies in favor of globalization, and the WTO advised or compelled, sometimes advised, sometimes compelled to accept or rectified the policies which are drawn by the WTO. So in this way, the international institution play the major role for the development of globalization. Okay. Now we discussed about the responsible for the globalization. Next, we will need to the positive and negative impacts of globalization. So when we think about the globalization, what is necessary? There is a need to identify what are the positive and negative impacts of globalization. First of all, we are going to discuss about the positive impacts of globalization. This is advantages of globalization, merits of globalization. Okay, so what are the useful features of the globalization? What is really useful to the world community because of the globalization? That things only we are going to discuss under the positive impacts of globalization. Globalization has proved to be very beneficial to all countries, and especially to the developing countries. There are two ideas. There are many positives and there are many negatives, particularly for the developing and underdeveloped countries. So now we will analyze one by one. We will analyze the advantages one by one. After that, we will discuss the disadvantages, yeah, in a detailed way. The significant impact of globalization is, this is the primary and first significant important aspect of the global benefit of the globalization: free flow of foreign capital. Flow of foreign capital. So this is the impact of one of the significant impact of globalization. Which one? Flow of foreign capital. So globalization encourages, promotes the flow of foreign capital in the form of foreign direct investment. You heard about FDI, commercial borrowings, collaborations, etc. So the transference of capital from developed to underdeveloped or developing countries will be mutually beneficial. So the developed countries have surplus capital. The developed countries have surplus capital. Developed and underdeveloped countries need the capital. So this globalization, that's why moved surplus capital into the need, wherever the capital is need. Okay, so the developed countries have surplus capital. Globalization helps in flow of surplus capital of developed countries to developing and underdeveloped countries. Okay, as a result of this transference of resources, developed countries earn profit, and in case of underdeveloped countries, investment in productive activities increases. Because so in this aspect, the capital flow of foreign capital, developed countries also benefit, because that country only going to earn the profit. In what way underdeveloped and developing countries benefit? Because in the new industries are created, they may got the job opportunities. So that is why both the countries are benefited because of the flow of foreign capital. So the next important thing is the globalization very much beneficial to the developing countries. How? Because of the integration of poor economies with richer one has provided many opportunities for the poor people to their lives. So the globalization has promoted economic equality and reduced poverty. In what way it connects the richer one with the poorer one? Because where it is nothing, I already told, it helps to flow the surplus capital into wherever the country in the need of capital. So in that way it integrates the poor economies with the richer one. So in this manner globalization helped reduce poverty in a large number of the developing countries. So that is why it is beneficial to the developing and underdeveloped countries. And another advantage of globalization is entry of multinational corporation. Whatever we discussed in the futures, we are going to discuss under the benefits, under the demerits. Okay, so first of all we discussed about the benefits. So that is why the another advantage of globalization is entry of multinational corporations. So the globalization, the globalization promotes the entry of multinational corporations. These corporations have unique and empirical capacity to increase the production and distribution. Wherever they go, they make radical changes in the existing production system of that country. With the issue of superior technology, professional managerial skill and quality are of the paramount to the country. So the multinational corporation have the ideas of advanced technology. So wherever they go, what they will change the entire production system. For example, you take if one multinational company started a textile industry, it will use whatever new technologies available in the world. So that is why the production method may changed. The protection system is changed. So with the advancement, they utilize not only the advancement scientific techniques, they also use some of the managerial skills, the managerial skills, as well as the marketing technologies, whatever. They are very good knowledge in this aspect. So that is why the multinational, wherever multinational organization, the entry of a multinational organization also one of the benefit during the globalization. Okay, so the next advantage, we can identify the increase in the knowledge. I already told the multinational corporation, which are the important organs of globalization. It impart the training to the local employees in respect of modern techniques of production, marketing, finance, exports, etc. This will increase the knowledge of that countries. So the rapid increase in knowledge through globalization provides a new potential for developing countries to grow faster. The knowledge exploitation is the driving technical change, which is changing the nature of global interaction and competition. In short, globalization results in the diffusion of knowledge for the benefit of all. Okay, so another merit is the advancement of technology and the marketing skills. So the modern technology and the managerial services are made available to the enterprises established in different parts of the globe by the multinational corporations. Whatever the technology they have, they utilize the technology for their industry. So that is why, as a result, the productivity of these enterprises increased. As a productivity of these enterprises increases and resources are optimally utilized. It is due to globalization that technology has been transferred from developed countries to the developing countries. For example, you take after the globalization only, we use Apple iPhones, the advanced whatever the advanced technology used in the USA, that is also available here because of that the technology. Okay, so due to the globalization process. And another important thing is it is very important impact of positive impact of globalization in this aspect. Which one? The socio-economic transformation. There are some positives, there are some negatives. First we will discuss the positives. Okay, we will discuss the negatives in under the disadvantages. So the globalization is not only an economic phenomena, but also a cultural and social phenomena. Okay, so it is found that due to globalization, personal management and other superior positions will come to underdeveloped countries with their own lifestyles, which will have good influence on the society. For example, you take people attracted by Euro-American lifestyles, and they also adopt some good features of the society, such as dignity of labor, the responsibility for neighborhood or community welfare, respect for law and order, respect for knowledge and character. There would be a positive advantage in terms of such virtues spread to rural areas. Then the rural people will also be benefited and liberated from wrong and blind beliefs, because these are the socio-economic transformation due to the globalized process, globalization world. So we could find another significant advantages of globalization is beneficial to consumers. Beneficial to consumers because it is very important merit of globalization. First, you remember, globalization promotes the competition because there are many multinational companies started to produce the products. So that is why globalization promote the competition. Under the pressure of competition, organization will strive to give best of their effort. So there is no denying the fact that competition brought the world economic order many benefits in the terms of very efficient economy at a very low cost. Because of this globalization, we we access many products. We have alternatives in a product. For example, if you want to buy a TV, means there are a lot of TVs available in the market. You have the right to choose the best one from that available market. So that is why the organization try to give their best in a cheaper way. So that is why it is beneficial to the consumers. So this helps to bring down the prices because consumers have a choice and can drive inefficient operators out of the business, because whenever the products are available in a quality and in an economic way, people are choose in that product only. So other products they removed from the market. So that is why it is very much useful to the consumers, because it reduced the cost of the products. So the next merit is uh, merit of globalization is to develop the world trade. So, globalization has extended world trade. It reduces the space and develop the borderless trade due to liberalized policies. Because the countries which is followed the liberalized policies, they opened the door for the world trade. So the establishment of WTO in 1995 aimed at discouraging bilateralism and encouraging the multilateralism. So that is why globalization is reflected in the rising share of international trade in world output. Okay, do you clear? So in what way it promotes the world trade? Because the countries which is followed the countries which is followed the liberalized policies, the country removed the barriers of world trade, barriers of open trade, free trade. So that is why it is promoted in a easiest way. So this is also one of the merit. So the another important merit of globalization is international division of labor. International division of labor. This is very important benefit of globalization. So the globalization implies the functional integration of internationally dispersed activities. It causes a new type of international division of labor. It is manifested in the ability of producers to slice up the value chain, that is breaking up the production process into many geographically separated steps. A good product is produced in a number of stages in different countries. For example, you take for the manufacturing of car, the engine is produced in one country, the body is produced in another country, the electrical items, the electrical related items are produced in the country. Finally finally all are assembled in one country. In, for example, you take what happened in the Ford, in Ford companies in Sibirmur. So assembling only, they here the car companies made only the assembling the car. So other products are manufacturing the different parts of the car is different parts of the world. Okay, so that is why it is slicing up the value chain. So that is international division of labor. One product is produced, one finished product is produced in many different countries. Wherever, I already told, wherever the raw material is available, wherever the technology is available, wherever the labor is available. So that country, that the part of the product produced and in one in finally in one place, it is assembled as a full-fledged product. Okay, so these are the positive uh, impact of the globalization. Okay, so I have been believed that you got some useful information regarding the advantages of globalization. So the next we will discuss the negative impacts of the globalization. On the one hand, supporters of the globalization emphasizing that it has made the world more interdependent and integrated, promoted faster growth and reduced poverty, raised the productivity and living standards of people in countries that open themselves to the global marketplace. Global marketplace. On the other hand, its critics call it as the main source of growing dependency and a neo-colonialism. Developing countries are increasingly become more and more dependent on developed countries and their MNCs. Along with the MNCs, international institutions like IMF, the World Bank, and WTO are becoming the instruments of neo-colonialism. All these are tightening the noose of the developing countries. Okay, we will analyze the disadvantages of globalization one by one. First of all, globalization diminishing the role of state, diminishing the role of state. In recent times, the state sovereignty in many developing countries in the south has been severely reduced under the influence of uh, globalization and of increasingly detailed prescription from the international financial institutions and other external actors. So the state sovereignty is no more absolute, and non-state actors are playing the significant role in the national policies of the state as well as the international politics. Economic policies of the developing countries are being dictated by international financial institutions or by donor countries, that is developed countries. Do you clear? So the globalization diminishing means reducing the role of state. So it gives the threats to the state sovereignty because it guides the state to formulate the policies. For example, you take WTO, IMF, these are guiding the states to change their policies towards in favor of globalization, towards in favor of some multinational organizations. So that is why it diminishing the role of state. Wow. State means which is necessary. Sovereignty is the necessary factor of the state. It play the role over the sovereignty of the state. So that is why I told it diminishing the role of state. The second thing is it is very much harmful to the developing countries. It is not my opinion. It is the opinion of, do you understand? The UNDP Human Development Report of 1919 states that the benefits of the globalization in the past decade have been unevenly shared between the countries, regions, and social classes in individual countries. Many countries have experienced negative growth and declining standard of living despite being well integrated into global economy. So the globalization of third world countries simply means loss of economic independence, mortgaging economy to foreign capital, and subjugation to the industrial countries. So this is the statement of UNDP programs, Human Development Report of 1919. Okay, so it is very much harmful to the developing countries. Okay, so the next one is means of neo-colonialism. You know, neo-colonialism. So it's the collapse of Cold War, related support structures maintained by the superpowers. The room was now wide open for global forces of various kinds, that is financial, international financial institutions, WTO, commercial institution to claim direct access to the countries, especially developing. Many of them quite vulnerable. So the developing countries are becoming more and more dependent on these global forces who are also acting as facilitators of neoliberalism. Okay, so these global forces are adapting to establish the neo-colonialism. Why it is considered as the neo-colonialism? So in the discourse of globalization, new key terms in trend, that is civil society, democracy, human rights, economic reforms, which not only ignored the state sovereignty but also dethroned the state from its dominant positions, because I already told it guides the state to formulate the policies. So that is why the state sovereignty is diminishing, reduced in such a way. So the another thing is the removal of dominant parties from the national political scene, not because they were undemocratic, but because they were perceived as major obstacle to the kind of reforms demanded by the international financial institutions and major donor countries. For example, you take, if a country is orthodox, if a country is supporting to the orthodox ideology, they did not permit to the globalization, these MNCs, international financial institution, or play a role against that political party, they overthrown or um, taken away from that party in that national scale. So next thing is the conditionality prescribing donor dependent states how to restructure their internal organization and management procedure, or tuning independent state status into dependent states, because these things in this organization dictate the states to change change in structural wise to institutional wise. So that is why these things change the state position in independent into dependent status, because these are the institutions funding the states. So that is why the states are ready to accept their demands. Okay, so the next one is the reduction of ability of formally independent states to independent states to do their own policy thinking, planning and formulating to an absolute minimum, and having to accept many ready-made packages of the policies and project proposals. For example, what happened for the formulation of UDHR? So it is advised by Human Rights Commission. So that policy is adopted by India. So in the same way, whatever the policies framed by WTO, that is accepted by the nation states. So without change, they slightly change some things. Okay, so they accept the ready-made packages which is provided by the international institutions. So these are one of the disadvantages which is classify and analyze. These are the means of neocolonialism. Okay, so the next disadvantage of globalization is impact of religion. The discourse of globalization, it is very controversial. So the discourse of globalization is no longer confined to economics and politics, but also to culture and religion. In the contemporary globalized world, one witness within each of the world religion a double transformation, a progressive, practical, and diabolical transformation on the one hand, and a conservative fundamentalist on the other hand. It also promotes the religion. Okay, globalization, somewhat it promotes. Okay, and another notable issue is globalization of terrorism. It is one of the biggest disadvantages of the globalization. Globalization means free borderless state, free flow of everything. So that is why terrorism also free flow of. So the globalization involves not only free flow of goods, services, capital, labor, finance, but also ideas, formation, ideas, information, drugs, arms, and even terrorists across the globe. Okay, so the networks of transnational terrorists are also operating in the context of globalization. So, in the beginning, the terrorist functions within the country, but in this time, they they organize their group in worldwide. Okay, in a global terrorist. Okay, so such networks are also beneficiaries of information revolution, because with the use of information revolution, the terrorist groups also grow. They functions in the globe worldwide. So such networks are also beneficiaries of information revolution. By transferring the arms and drugs across the borders, the terrorist grouping can sustain themselves in the remotest corners of the world through the international underground movements. Terrorism indeed has become a global phenomena because of the science, the advancement of science and technology. And the next thing is cutthroat foreign competition. It is one of the biggest demerit of globalization. So the indigenous people or the people in a particular country are not able to compete with the multinational companies. Is it possible a small industrialist compete with the big one? It is not possible, because they have advancement in science and technology. They have advanced technology for using the production of their products. But these people, with the use of their indigenous technology they produced, so the product cost may vary. For example, you take the price of Kanjipuram pattu differ from the pattu produced in other world. Okay, so it is cost wise it is high, but the quality wise it is high. Okay, so the same way the indigenous people are not able to compete with multinational organizations. So that is why it cutthroat the foreign competition. So the critics of the view that globalization will lead to foreign countries to cutthroat competition. It will weaken political, social, and economic independence. Multinationals might be in a position to manipulate things to other advantage, which will prove detrimental to the interests of poor nations. By making use of improved technology in their production system, this corporation fix lower price of their products and thus compete out our local producers. Once the indigenous industry is completely destroyed by this competition, multinational competitions have full control over the market. For in many aspects, it happened. Okay, so that is why UNDP report says that it diluting the nation's economy. Okay, so because many industries overthrown because of this multinational organization. Okay, so that is why the rich are rich at most of the poor, and development is always at the expense of cutthroat competition with the underdeveloped. So the next disadvantages is causes of economic inequality. It has further been criticized that globalization will lead to economic inequality. In what way it leads to economic inequality? That is the question. So the globalization leads to growth of multinational corporations. This corporation has proved harmful to the goal of economic inequality in more than one way. In what way it leads to economic inequality? For example, you take the person earn from multinational companies like Microsoft, or the wages may differ from one multinational company with the another local company. Okay, so this may lead to economic inequality. Okay, so the regional first of all the regional inequality happened. For example, the regional inequality has further aggravated because of this. Because the multinational companies are interested in setting up industries in particular regions, and hence those regions developed very rapidly and other regions remain undeveloped. For example, you take what happened for example, you take Tamil Nadu and Bihar. So the multinational companies, wherever the policies are adjust, the multinational company choose that region, developed, and apart from other region are not developed. So that is one of the reason. Okay. So the region inequality happened. Okay. And the next one is multinational corporations pay. I already told multinational organization pay more salaries and perks into their employee than the other employees. Okay. So this is the one of the biggest reason the rent of the Chennai increased. Okay. Chennai increased because of the multinational companies pay the more comparing to the government servants. So that is why the rent of the particular region increased. So that is one of the inequality happened in the system. This widens the gap between the income of the laborers, giving rise to economic inequality. These corporations give more importance to the production of luxury goods than the production of mass consumption good. So another important aspect of the multinational corporations produce are ready to produce the luxury goods than the mass consumption goods. For example, Apple, like that, Apple iPhone, Apple iPad, like that. Okay. So these corporations further highlight the rural and urban disparity. By setting up their industries in the urban areas, they encourage the villagers to leave their villages and settle down in the urban areas. In short, globalization leads to inequality and exploitation. Okay. And exploitation. And the next demerit is it increase in debt burden. The immediate impact of globalization might be to increase the debt burden of developing countries which are already under heavy debt, because the countries uh, got the loan from the IMF like that. So the countries are not able to repay their loan payments. So that is why it increase the debt burden of developing and underdeveloped countries. And the another demerit of globalization is adverse effect on balance of payment. So the globalization has adversely affected the balance of payment position of the most of the underdeveloped countries. Their imports usually consist of capital goods and intermediate products. After independence, several of underdeveloped countries try to adopt import substitution as a vehicle for their development rather than effectively replacing the imports. Their demand for capital goods rose sharply, which required increased amount of foreign exchange. But foreign exchange becomes scarce due to the declining terms of trade for their exports. And the next demerit is increased dependence of multinational corporation. This is one of the very worst situation we faced due to the globalization. So the countries are incorporated in global economy through a network of international protection, trade, and finance. An important element of the globalization process is the growth of intra-firms trade, which creates barriers to entry for the developing countries. This increases the value of bribes with multinational corporations for obtaining access to the world market. So the key to success in the international marketplace seems to be in the attitude, I will make what you need and not I will sell what I make. So this increases the dependence on multinational corporates. The main objective of these corporations is to earn the maximum profit. So to achieve this objective, they invest their capital in underdeveloped countries. Such an investment proves very profitable. They taken our resources. Okay. So the next another disadvantages of the process of globalization is dubious experiments of policy reforms. The critics are of the view that in the name of globalization, the underdeveloped countries are pushed into the doubtful experiment of policy reforms, including deregulation and internationalization of financial sector, privatization, and elimination of all kinds of restriction. So these are not observed one. They move towards in a doubtful way. So this is offered as solution regardless of countries, institutional and financial background. These reforms may prove counterproductive if undertaken without considering the strength and weakness of the country. These reforms may expose the economy to excessive dependence upon external events beyond its control. For example, you take uh, Singapore adopted the liberalized policy, it succeeded. So is it possible to apply these things in Sri Lanka or another country? No. But this globalization compelled these countries to adopt. So, but these countries are moved towards adopted these things in a doubtful way. Okay, so that is one of the demerit of globalization. So the next one is the element of uncertainty. Uncertainty. Yeah. So this leads to many problems in underdeveloped countries or developing countries, because globalization is expected to promote the flow of foreign capital, but an element of uncertainty looms large in respect of foreign capital. It may be repatriated at any time. It can be withdrawn at any time. If any they may move the country. They closed their country. For what happened in Nokia, in Sriberumbudur? So this happened. So okay, so it may be repatriated at any time. Hence, foreign capital can never be a permanent part of an economy. Okay, at the time of crisis, when foreign capital is needed the most, the availability becomes scarce. The Okay, so that is one of the problem. So when so-called economic tigers of East Asia were dire in the need of foreign investment, the flow of foreign capital was not available. So this made their crisis even more worse. The workers and trade union leaders fear that globalization will lead to underemployment. This also leads to uncertainty to their work culture. The next important demerit is interference of international institution. I many times I told that. So it plays the diminishing role of the state sovereignty. So the international institution advise the state, guide the state to frame the policies. Okay, so globalization has resulted in increasing interference of international institutions like World Bank and IMF in the policy making process of underdeveloped country. This is due to the fact that the shortage of foreign exchange reserves to cover import bills force the country to borrow or attract foreign investment. If this continues, then after some time, the deficit burden becomes unmanageable and leads to debt crisis. Okay. Mm, so these are the disadvantages of globalization. And the next move we will move the relationship. First, changing role of the state. Instead of being contradictory, globalization and sovereignty are complementary. The economic state not totally dead, and then the borderless state, inequality in the context of globalization and international politics, the expansion of security, and the theorizing the democratic states. So these are the area which have the relationship between the globalization and the international relations. Okay, so mm, we will move to the conclusions. So the political and socio-economic effects of globalization are exaggerated by both its detractors and supporters. Globalization has been sold as a part of universal FINACA. It had been argued in its favor that it would be bring most immediate prosperity and well-being. But unfortunately, that is not what we have been seeing around us. If we consider what growth globalization began to accelerate in last few years, what we have to conclude is that the average growth of the world economy was mediocre. Globalization is not producing the acceleration of growth worldwide as expected. Globalization is mutually beneficial when the capital, labor, technology, and goods flow between the equals. This is a important conclusions. Whenever these capital, labor, technology, and goods flow between the equal, that is mutually benefited. So otherwise, any attempt by the underdeveloped economies to globalize their economy can rebound adversely on the vast majority of the people who is in poverty, lack of education, and malnutrition. Despite its criticism, the globalization is going to stay. Recently, the globalization debate shifted from focusing on whether world economic integration is good or bad to the best ways of managing the globalization process. While globalization has the potential to make all people better off, there is no assurance that it will do or that all changes will be positive. So global markets, global technology, global ideas, global solidarity can enrich the lives of the people everywhere. The challenge is ensure that the benefits are shared equitably and that thing is increasing interdependence works of the people, not just for profits. It is the idea, it is says by Human Development Report in the year 1999 of UNDP. Okay, thank you.